Your mother is trying to save your brother's life. She's holding him, begging you to stop. You're the emperor of Rome. He's the other emperor. Your father thought you could rule together. You prove him wrong by stabbing your brother repeatedly while your mother holds him. Her hands are covered in his blood as he dies in her embrace. You're Caracalla, and this is just the beginning. 20,000 more will die because they supported him. You're born Lucius Septimius Bassianus in 188 AD, but history will know you as Caracalla, a nickname derived from the Gallic hooded cloak you favor. Your brother Geta is born a year later, and from your earliest memories you cannot stand him. This isn't the normal sibling rivalry of children competing for parental attention. This is visceral, consuming hatred that will define both your lives and end his. Your father, Septimius Severus, is a military commander who fights his way to the imperial throne through civil war. He's practical, brutal, and brilliant at warfare. Your mother, Julia Domna, is a Syrian intellectual, cultured and politically sophisticated. Between them, they give you every advantage: education, military training, exposure to power from childhood. But they cannot make you love your brother. The hatred is mutual and obvious to everyone at court. You and Geta fight constantly, physically when you're young, politically as you mature. Ancient sources describe incidents of you trying to harm each other during childhood, of being separated by worried tutors and guards, of your parents despairing that their sons would ever cooperate. Every meal becomes a battlefield. Every public appearance requires careful choreography to keep you apart. Your father sees the problem but misreads it completely. He thinks that giving you both responsibilities, treating you as equals, forcing you to work together will eventually create brotherhood and cooperation. It's the logic of a military man. Soldiers who fight together become brothers. But you're not soldiers under a common commander. You're rivals for absolute power, and every gesture of equality your father makes only intensifies the competition. You're physically stronger, more naturally gifted at military matters, favored by the soldiers who see in you their future commander. Geta is more intellectual, more like your mother, better at the subtle politics of the Senate and court. These differences should be complementary, but instead they become weapons you use against each other. You mock his bookishness, his preference for philosophy over warfare. He mocks your lack of subtlety, your brutal directness, your need for soldiers' approval. Your father makes you both Caesars, junior emperors, hoping this will satisfy you both and teach you to rule together. It does the opposite. In 208 AD, your father takes both of you on campaign to Britain. It's his last attempt to forge you into a functioning partnership through shared military experience. You're 19, Geta is 18, and the British campaign should be your training ground for joint rule. Instead, it becomes 3 years of barely contained violence between you, moderated only by your father's iron will and physical presence. Septimius Severus is dying. Illness has been consuming him for months, and by 211 AD, he knows he has little time left. He summons you and Geta to his deathbed in York and attempts to secure the future of his dynasty. His final advice is recorded by multiple sources: be harmonious, enrich the soldiers, and scorn all other men. The first instruction is impossible. The second you will both follow religiously. The third becomes your governing philosophy. But be harmonious requires something neither of you possesses: the ability to see your brother as anything other than an obstacle to absolute power. Your father dies in February 211 AD, and his last hope that brotherhood and shared interest in maintaining your dynasty would overcome your hatred dies with him. You're now co-emperors of Rome, the first brothers to rule jointly since the legendary Romulus and Remus. Everyone familiar with that myth knows how it ended, with fratricide. You both returned to Rome with your father's ashes, maintaining a facade of unity for the public and the army. But privately, you immediately begin maneuvering against each other. You cultivate the military, spending lavishly on bonuses for soldiers, appearing in military dress, emphasizing your warrior credentials. Geta works the Senate and civil administration, positioning himself as the legitimate civilized emperor versus your crude military populism. Your mother, Julia Domna, tries desperately to mediate. She understands that if you two cannot find a way to coexist, one of you will die, possibly both, and the dynasty your father built will collapse. She arranges meetings, negotiates, compromises, uses every tool of maternal authority and political skill she possesses. But you're beyond her control now. You're emperors, and no one, not even your mother, can command emperors. The hatred becomes so intense, the court so divided, that an extraordinary proposal emerges: partition the empire itself. You would rule the western provinces from Rome. Geta would rule the eastern provinces from a new capital, possibly Alexandria or Antioch. The Roman Empire, which has been unified for over 2 centuries, would be split in two to accommodate your inability to share power. The proposal is seriously considered. Delegations are sent to survey potential new capitals. Administrative plans are drawn up for dividing the military, the treasury, the bureaucracy. Legal scholars debate whether Roman law allows for such a partition. Your mother's advisors explore the logistics of maintaining 2 separate imperial courts. Julia Domna opposes the plan with every weapon in her considerable arsenal. To her, dividing the empire means destroying everything your father built, fragmenting Roman power, creating 2 weaker states where enemies can play one brother against the other. She argues, pleads, threatens, manipulates. She's a Syrian from a family of hereditary priests, and she understands better than you Romans that divided power is weakness. She proposes a different solution. Give up. One of you should abdicate, retire with vast wealth and honors, live as a private citizen with every luxury except power. This way, the empire remains unified. One brother rules, the other lives comfortably, and the dynasty survives. It's a reasonable compromise. Neither of you will consider it for a moment. The brother who abdicated would be vulnerable, powerless, likely murdered, eventually by the ruling brother or his successors. There's no retirement from imperial politics, only rule or death. You both understand this instinctively. The partition plan collapses, not because of your mother's arguments, but because neither of you trust the other to honor any agreement. If the empire is divided, what's to stop the brother with the eastern provinces, wealthier, more populous, from eventually attacking the western provinces? What's to stop either brother from claiming sole rule as your father's legitimate heir? The failed partition attempt makes clear what everyone has known but not acknowledged. One of you must die. The only question is which one and when. December 26th, 211 AD. Less than a year after your father's death, you've arranged a meeting with Geta in your mother's apartments. You tell her you want to make peace, to discuss a genuine reconciliation. Your mother, desperate for any sign of harmony between her sons, facilitates the meeting. She still believes that maternal authority, the bonds of family, the memory of your father might overcome your hatred. Geta is suspicious. He's not stupid. He knows you want him dead, just as you know he wants you dead. But refusing to meet would look cowardly, would suggest he fears you, would weaken his position with the soldiers and Senate who are watching this power struggle carefully. And it's in your mother's chambers. Julia Domna is neutral territory, a place where matricide, the murder of your mother, would be unthinkable, even for you. He calculates that you won't risk harming your mother to get to him. He's wrong. You enter your mother's apartments with Geta already present. Your mother positions herself between you, literally trying to mediate, to facilitate conversation, to build some bridge across the chasm of hatred. The scene is almost domestic. Two brothers and their mother in private rooms, away from the formality of court, supposedly working toward family harmony. You've brought Praetorian guards with you, disguised or hidden nearby. This isn't a peace meeting, it's an ambush. At your signal, they rush in. Geta realizes immediately what's happening and runs to your mother, throwing himself into her arms, begging her to protect him, to save him, appealing to her as his mother to stop this. Julia Domna tries. She stands between you and your brother. She pleads with you. She orders you to stop, but she's no longer dealing with her son. She's facing an emperor who has decided that fratricide is necessary for sole rule. And in that moment, every bond of family, every year of her love and care, every appeal to your shared blood means nothing. You push past her, or perhaps you push her aside. The ancient sources aren't clear on the exact mechanics. What they are clear about is what happens next. You stab your brother, not once, cleanly, as a soldier might kill an enemy. You stab him repeatedly, driven by years of accumulated hatred, by the relief of finally ending this competition, by the rage of someone who has lived in a cage of shared power and is finally breaking free. Geta is unarmed, unprepared for combat, and no match for you physically, even if he weren't surprised. He dies in your mother's arms. She's holding him, trying to shield his body with hers, and he bleeds out onto her, into her, his blood soaking her dress and covering her hands. She has to feel him die, feel his breathing stop, feel him go limp while you stand over them both, bloodied weapon still in hand. The psychological horror of this moment cannot be overstated. Julia Domna has lost a son, but not to disease or battle or accident, to her other son, whom she watched murder his brother while she held the victim. She's covered in Geta's blood because you killed him in her embrace. Every maternal instinct to protect, every political calculation about dynasty, every hope for reconciliation dies with Geta in that room. You leave immediately, going to the Praetorian Guard camp to secure their loyalty with the story that Geta was plotting against you, that you discovered his conspiracy, that this was necessary execution rather than murder. The soldiers, who loved your father and have been enriched by your generosity, accept this explanation or pretend to. Either way, they proclaim you sole emperor. Your mother is left in her apartments with her dead son's body covered in his blood, processing what she has just witnessed. Ancient sources describe her as being in profound shock, unable to speak or act for hours. When she finally does emerge, she maintains the public fiction that Geta was a traitor who deserved death. What else can she do? You're now sole emperor, and opposing you means dying like Geta. She chooses survival over justice, pragmatism over maternal grief. But the murder in her chambers is only the beginning of the horror. What comes next will make Geta's death seem almost merciful by comparison. Killing Geta isn't enough. You understand that thousands of Romans, senators, soldiers, freedmen, servants, supported your brother, either openly or quietly. They represent a potential threat, a possible focus for opposition or revenge. More fundamentally, they're witnesses to the fact that Geta was a legitimate emperor, that Rome once had two rulers, that you murdered your co-emperor rather than sharing power. You decide that Geta and everyone associated with him must be erased from history. What follows is one of the most systematic political purges in Roman history. Ancient sources estimate that 20,000 people are killed in the months following Geta's death. Modern historians debate whether this number is accurate or exaggerated, but even conservative estimates put the death toll in the thousands. The purge begins with obvious targets: Geta's closest advisors, his personal guards, his freedmen. These men are arrested and executed within days of Geta's death. But the killing doesn't stop there. Anyone who showed Geta favor, who supported his policies, who seemed to prefer him as emperor, who mourned him publicly, or even failed to celebrate his death enthusiastically enough, becomes suspect. Senators who had been friendly with Geta find themselves accused of conspiracy. Military officers who had served under him are charged with treason. Even ordinary citizens who had benefited from Geta's patronage or who expressed sympathy for him are imprisoned or killed. The message is clear: Geta never existed as a legitimate emperor, and anyone who remembers him as such is an enemy of the state. You implement damnation of memory, condemnation of memory. Geta's name is chiseled from inscriptions throughout the empire. His face is removed from statues and paintings. Official documents are rewritten to omit his reign. You even attempt to ban people from speaking his name in public. Rome is instructed to forget that you ever had a brother, that there was ever co-rule, that fratricide stains your throne. The psychological impact on Rome is profound. Citizens learn to lie reflexively about the recent past, to deny what they witnessed, to participate in collective fiction. This creates a climate of terror, where simple memory becomes dangerous, where truth itself is criminalized. Julia Domna faces an impossible situation. She has lost one son to murder, and is now dependent on the son who committed that murder. She's covered herself in the blood of one emperor, and must now serve the other. Her choice is stark: participate in the erasure of Geta, or join him in death. She chooses survival and power. Julia Domna publicly supports your version of events, that Geta was a traitor who forced you to act in self-defense. She appears beside you at public ceremonies, lending maternal and imperial legitimacy to your sole rule. She continues to serve as Empress Mother, advisor, and political partner. To outsiders, she seems to accept Geta's death with remarkable composure, but ancient sources hint at the psychological cost. She reportedly suffers from what we might now call trauma, nightmares, periods of dissociation, moments where she seems to forget where she is. She takes to wearing darker clothing and minimal jewelry, a subtle mourning that cannot be made explicit. Sometimes servants find her staring at her hands, as if she can still see Geta's blood on them. Your relationship with your mother becomes strange and strained. She's the only person who knows what really happened in those chambers, who witnessed your fratricide firsthand. You need her for political legitimacy, but her presence is a constant reminder of what you did. She lives with the knowledge that you murdered your brother in front of her, and that if necessary you would kill her too. She manages this impossible position with remarkable political skill. She builds her own power base, cultivates relationships independent of you, positions herself as indispensable to imperial administration. She's not just your mother, she's a power broker in her own right, the Augusta who helps govern an empire while privately mourning the son killed by her other son. Some historians suggest she never forgave you, that she waited for opportunity to exact revenge, that her later support for your enemies was calculated payback for Geta. Others argue she was simply pragmatic, a survivor doing what was necessary in a world where power meant everything and family meant nothing. Having murdered your brother and purged his supporters, you settle into a reign defined by military campaigning and escalating paranoia. You spend vast sums on the army, increasing soldiers' pay, improving their conditions, identifying yourself completely with military culture. You're rarely in Rome, preferring the company of legionaries to senators, the battlefield to the palace. The military adore you. You live among them, eat their food, march with them, fight beside them. You've increased their pay by 50%, making Roman soldiers the best compensated military force in the ancient world. To them, you're not a fratricide, you're a soldier emperor who values the army above all else, which is exactly what they want. But away from the camps, you're increasingly isolated and suspicious. The purge has created thousands of grieving relatives, friends of the dead, people with reason to hate you. You see potential assassins everywhere. Your guards are rotated constantly. Your food tasters are multiple and random. You trust no one except the soldiers who protect you, and even they are watched carefully for signs of wavering loyalty. You develop strange habits and obsessions. You become fascinated with Alexander the Great, styling yourself as his reincarnation, visiting his tomb in Alexandria, adopting Macedonian dress and weapons. This isn't just admiration, it's identity displacement, as if you can escape being the emperor who killed his brother by becoming someone else entirely. Your cruelty becomes legendary. A man makes a joke about you in the street. You have him executed. A senator speaks Geta's name accidentally. He's arrested and killed. A soldier shows insufficient enthusiasm during your Alexander obsession. He's flogged. You're creating a climate where fear is the primary tool of governance, where everyone lives in terror of accidentally provoking your rage. In 213 AD, you visit Alexandria, a city that had supported Geta, and where you suspect continued sympathy for him. Your response is to massacre thousands of Alexandrians, including scholars and intellectuals who represented the city's pride. The slaughter is so extensive that parts of the city are depopulated. It's collective punishment on a massive scale, revenge for a city's insufficient enthusiasm for the emperor who murdered his brother. In the midst of your military campaigns and purges, you undertake the most ambitious building project of your reign, the construction of massive public baths in Rome. The baths of Caracalla will be the largest and most luxurious bathing complex the Roman world has ever seen, accommodating 1,600 bathers at once, featuring libraries, gardens, and spaces for exercise and socializing. The baths are a calculated legacy project. You understand that history will remember you for killing Geta, but perhaps it can also remember you for giving Rome something magnificent. The baths are your attempt to buy redemption, to prove you're not just a fratricide and tyrant, but also a benefactor of the people. The irony is profound. You're building a monument to public health, leisure, and civilization, while simultaneously conducting one of the most brutal reigns in Roman history. The same emperor who orders mass executions also orders the construction of beautiful spaces for Roman citizens to relax and socialize. The baths and the bloodshed are both expressions of your power, one constructive, one destructive, both massive in scale. The construction requires enormous resources, marble from across the empire, thousands of workers, engineering innovations to supply water and heat. You divert funds from other projects, levy new taxes, appropriate property. The baths will be your legacy, and you're willing to pay any price for them. In a sense, the baths are your confession. By building something so large and permanent, you're acknowledging that you need to be remembered for something other than fratricide. You cannot undo Geta's murder or resurrect the 20,000 dead from the purge, but you can create something that future generations will use and appreciate, something that might balance the scales of history in your favor. The baths are still standing today, 1,800 years later. They're tourist attractions, studied by architects, admired for their engineering and beauty. Most visitors know nothing about the emperor who built them, or if they do, they know him as the bath builder rather than the brother killer. In this sense, your legacy project succeeded. The baths outlived your memory. Your reign ends far from Rome. On yet another military campaign, you're in Mesopotamia in 217 AD, fighting the Parthians when you stop to urinate beside a road. Your praetorian prefect, Julius Marcius, has been quietly plotting against you. His brother was among those killed in the purge following Geta's death, and he's waited 6 years for revenge. As you urinate, Marcius approaches as if to guard you and stabs you in the back. Other conspirators rush in to finish the job. You die on a Mesopotamian roadside, murdered by the brother of a man you killed for supporting Geta. The circle closes. The fratricide is killed by fraternal revenge. The emperor who began his sole rule with a murder in his mother's chambers ends with a murder in the dust. You're 29 years old. You've been emperor for 6 years, sole emperor for all 6 of them. Your reign has been characterized by military success, architectural achievement, and systematic brutality. You've enriched the army, expanded Roman territory, built magnificent baths, and murdered tens of thousands, including your own brother. Your mother, Julia Domna, hears of your death while in Syria. According to sources, she initially tries to maintain power, claiming the right to govern as Empress Mother, but she has no military support, no political base strong enough to challenge the new regime. Within months, she's dead, possibly by suicide, possibly by murder disguised as suicide. She joins her sons in death, the mother who witnessed fratricide and lived to see both her children dead before her. The Severan dynasty, which your father built through civil war and military genius, which he tried to secure by giving you both power, which your mother tried to preserve through mediation and compromise, collapses. Your successor, Macrinus, immediately begins reversing your policies, reducing soldiers' pay, ending the military campaigns, making peace with Parthia. The empire you tried to rule through fear and military loyalty proves impossible to hold once you're dead. History remembers you primarily for 2 things: killing Geta and building baths. The fratricide overshadows everything else: the military victories, the architectural achievements, the administrative reforms. You're the emperor who killed his brother, and no amount of marble and water can wash that blood away. The question historians debate is whether you were always a monster or whether power made you one. Were you born with the capacity for fratricide, or did the competition for the throne create it? Would you have been different if your father had chosen one of you as sole heir rather than forcing you to share power? The answer, perhaps, doesn't matter. You stood in your mother's chambers and murdered your brother while she held him. You ordered 20,000 deaths to secure your sole rule. You ruled through terror and military loyalty until terror and military loyalty killed you. Whether you were born a monster or made into one, the result was the same. Rome bled for your inability to share power, and the empire learned once again that family means nothing when thrones are at stake.